Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee, and your host, Chairman of the American Conservative Union, Matt Schlapp.
You know, if this was like we were just talking about sports, we were talking about professional sports, I have a feeling you'd have a lot of teams that would want you to be their governor in their state. It's nothing, we've never experienced anything like this red, blue divide. We're in a state with red officials in all the important positions. Your states are similar. Let's start off by talking about what's going on in this country, Governor Lee. Why are we so divided?
Yeah, I think we're divided because there's an effort to undermine this country from the very foundation. There are those who don't like this country, who don't believe in what it stands for. They don't believe in the greatness and the exceptionalism of it. And they will, from within, they know that the way to destruct is to divide from within. And there's a strategy there that is relentless.
And I told the governor I'm from Kansas. And, you know, the Kansas, Oklahoma, there's a little, is there a Kansas in here? That's great. We're not just Okies in the room. But as much as there's competition between these neighboring states, we're very proud of the job you're doing in Oklahoma. And Oklahoma always had, there we go. Oklahoma always had a very proud tradition of more moderate to conservative Democrats. Those days are over, right? They just seem to have embraced this more radical idea of socialism.
You know, I don't think there's ever been a bigger time when there's a difference between a blue state and a red state. And COVID really brought that out. You know, we believe in freedoms in Oklahoma, and I know we believe that in Tennessee, and personal responsibility. It's what we talked about the whole time. I don't believe that the government should be involved in every part of our lives. And you saw blue state governors really trying to dictate people going to church, what they can do. And we just had a totally different approach in Oklahoma by keeping businesses open, by believing and trusting Oklahomans, being transparent with the data. And you're seeing now states and businesses flock from states that had shutdown mentalities to states like Oklahoma and Tennessee and Texas and Florida. That were open for business.
Right. Well, we left Maryland and went to Florida, and we went to Texas. Now, we're kind of pondering this idea of maybe even having another CPAC. I know my staff is quaking in their boots, their cowboy boots right now. And we're kind of wondering, there's some other really important red states besides Florida and Texas. I don't know what you guys think, but, you know, there's Nashville, there's Oklahoma City.
Nashville, that's right.
I don't know. You guys have any opinions on which would be better? I don't know.
Oklahoma.
Maybe you need to make one of those bets.
Hey, we had 350,000 people celebrating the greatest nation in the world last July 4th the other night in downtown Nashville at a Brad Paisley concert. I think we could
handle it?
Yeah, I think we could handle that.
All right.
Come to Oklahoma and Garth Brooks plays for you every night. So.
And I kind of like his wife too.
Yeah.
So this issue of criminal justice reform, I hate being controversial. But it's interesting, the left has an approach to how they deal with communities of color. This whole idea of embracing radicalism, defunding cops, chaos in many of our major cities, that's one approach. Then there's the approach that our team of Pat Nolan, David Safavian, and partnering with both of you who are real leaders on this issue of criminal justice reform, which is, let's do the right thing from a public policy standpoint. And it turns out that the right thing when it comes to criminal justice reform is not everybody has to be locked up forever for fairly minor reasons. And it turns out that communities of color are really responding to this new approach. Governor Lee, I know you got a great track record in Tennessee. Tell folks what you're thinking about.
You know, criminal justice reform is oftentimes misunderstood. Really, the left has, like they have with many of the issues that are important to Americans, the left has turned it into something that is divisive. That desire to undermine that which is a movement in the right direction, becoming a more perfect union, the desire to undermine that has labeled it the wrong way. Criminal justice reform is actually very conservative. Number one, it's a public safety issue. We've seen crime rise all over this country. Public safety, people want to live in a safe neighborhood. If you do criminal justice reform in a conservative way, tough on crime and smart on crime, recognizing that there are too many people incarcerated that should not be there, that are not a threat to society, but have become part of the system. 95% of everyone sitting in a jail cell is getting out, and they're all coming out into our communities. And right now, about half of them will recommit a crime and go right back into prison, and we pay for it. In Tennessee, at $30,000 a pop. Another victim, another crime, another $30,000. There's nothing about that we need to continue, particularly when, conservatives follow data. I mean, I'm an engineer by trade, and data drives our decision-making process. The evidence shows that if we take care of those in the right way, and I mean take care of them by paying attention to those that are coming out of prison, if we do that in a right way, we reduce recidivism rate, we reduce the crime rate, we reduce the cost to taxpayers, and we have an overall better outcome.
State of Oklahoma, you've been a real leader on this topic. Similar kind of themes?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. We have a saying in Oklahoma, let's lock up people that, we're afraid of, not that we're mad at. Right. And as a businessman, when I came into office, thank you. As I came into office the first time, I looked at all the data of where we compare to other states. And one thing that I wasn't proud of, in Oklahoma, we were 50th. We were last place among every other state. We incarcerated more men and women than any other state. And I just said, our people aren't any different than any other state. We either have a sentencing problem, we're incarcerating people too long. And so I really started digging into that. And I signed the largest commutation in U.S. history. I didn't know it at the time, but on one day I let 450 low-level drug offenders get out of prison. And we've seen our recidivism go down. We've seen violent crime, nonviolent crime go down in the state of Oklahoma. And so we're leading on that. We're looking at sentencing reform. And listen, we're absolutely protecting Oklahomans is my #1 priority. But again, we're going to look at how we do it, and we're going to do second chances. We passed the Stitt Act it's my wife's name, to give people like driver's license before they get out of prison so they can go get a job. But then you think about the DHS system and all the other drains on taxpayers when you do that. It's really a conservative approach. I closed a private prison in Oklahoma, saved the taxpayers $25 million. And so we're proud of that, and we think we should lead on this issue.
Yep. It's kind of funny, Republicans tend to be dollars and cents people. Like you're saying, you're a trained engineer. Actually, when you do the right thing in this area, you save a heck of a lot of money in your budgets. It's a strange thing that I don't think people understand. People like Joe Biden and Bill Clinton and a lot of Democrats who wanted to act like they were moderate were really tough on crime. They were the ones who were the leaders and lock everyone up and throw away every key. Like you said, even people who we didn't even have to fear because they weren't violent offenders. It just made good politics. And the problem with that is it costs a heck of a lot of money. At the same time, the Democrats don't seem to have any problem with letting anybody come through that border without even stopping. What is going on? Isn't that insane?
Well, it's a little bit of if you look at themes, like the theme to undermine, the theme of that really is based on lawlessness. I mean, what we see in the defund the police movement, that is a movement toward lawlessness. What we see with the largest movement of illegal immigration in this country in 20 years, that's lawlessness, where there's a disregard for law and order. That you see that theme occurring in one issue after the other. I'm actually going to the border tonight. We have 300 National Guardsmen on the border from Tennessee that are I'm very proud of these men and women and the work that they do for you and me to protect this country. So I'm going down there tonight to just observe and then to meet with them. It's an issue, whether it's criminal justice reform, whether it's the immigration policy and the lack of a secure border. There's lawlessness, a theme of lawlessness that runs through it. And we're a country of law and order. Our people all across America want to live in a civil society that's based on law and order. And if we do not defend and rigorously pursue that from law enforcement to the military to criminal justice reform, if we don't pursue that, then we'll lose this country.
Governor Stitt, the White House and Democrats are telling us all, they're spinning us, that they're the ones who are giving you all the money to fund the cops. Could you please set the record straight? You're laughing. That helps me understand if that could possibly be true. They're arguing that in the most recent bill, emergency spending, as they always love to call everything in Washington, that they're actually the ones plussing up all the accounts to pay for all the cops in the states. And that's their argument, that they're not for defunding the cops. Matter of fact, they're for funding all the cops. And I just, as a guy that's responsible for a state's budget, I'd like to know what's true.
Well, we haven't got one penny from the feds to fund police. That's all a state function. And we're doubling down on backing the blue in the state of Oklahoma. We passed an anti-doxing law this year to make sure that nobody can, we're not going to publish where the police live. That's not allowed. You can't attack a police officer. We're going to protect the immunity that they have. You know, other states, you're seeing recruitment go down. In Oklahoma, we just funded a completely full new trooper academy. We're hearing from all over the country of troopers and law enforcement wanting to leave their states. And so they know we've got our back in the state of Oklahoma. And so we are, like the governor said, a state of law and order.
Good for you. One of the things a lot of people don't know, if the interaction with the criminal justice system hasn't affected you or your family, it's pretty rough. This concept that 95% of these people who are incarcerated, they're coming back out into our communities. I think it's similar in your states. So the common sense approach is to say, if 95% of them are coming out, do you want them to be drug-free? Do you want them to be able to read and write? Do you want them to be able to have some skills that allow them to get a job and to have functional relationships with their loved ones? You know, this is, I know, something both of you have focused on, this idea of re-entry and making somebody ready. They're going to come to our communities. We have to understand that's a reality. And what we want them to do is have a job and have healthy relationships and not immediately get on assistance.
So I worked in a prison re-entry ministry for about 20 years before I became governor, mentored men coming out of prison, saw that if we make good decisions on people that are reentering society, then we'll have good outcomes. A particular ministry I worked with had about an 8% recidivism rate on men that stayed with their program for a year once they got out, as compared to 50% by the state. If we can move recidivism by 2, 3, 4 percentage points in a state, we save hundreds of millions of dollars. But more importantly, you know what we save? We save lives. We save, for every person we keep out of prison, their children will likely not go to prison. And if we didn't keep them out of prison, their child is likely to go there.
It kind of sounds like you're saying Jesus is the best parole officer. I don't know if that's...
he's the answer to a lot of challenges that we have. All of them, actually.
You know, we did something similar. I went to another state and toured some things that they'd done. And so we just set up a seminary in a state prison to bring Jesus behind those walls. And ultimately, we know that makes a difference.
I want to caution you two. You're getting very radical. This might get canceled from social media. I mean, this is really getting off the track here.
Yeah. Hey, you mentioned budget. I want to say this a minute, because you were bragging on his budget and really red states' budgets. It became really evident this year that the way conservatives manage taxpayer dollars there were stark differences across this country, and that matters. That matters because it allows us then to be able to invest in things like criminal justice reform. Tennessee was one of 7 states in the country that had a positive economic return from April 2020 to April 2021. There were only 7. And the reason we did that is because we knew, as a businessman just a few years ago, every time we made a decision in government, I looked at it from a businessman's perspective. We knew that keeping our businesses open through the pandemic was the only way that our people could survive. And because of that, we had surpluses. We had a positive economic return, as you said, and at the same time, you know, Tennessee's the 3rd lowest tax state per capita in the country. So we have very low taxes, virtually no debt, and yet we had surpluses after one of the greatest economic downturns in the country. That's what happens when you have conservative principles in managing a state budget versus what we see across the country.
Yeah. Well, to piggyback on that, I mean, you see it across the country, the red states that's kept businesses open. It's not rocket science. By being business friendly, having low tax policies, deregulating your agencies and your regulatory bodies, you have businesses wanting to flock there. And we had a budget surplus this year as well. One of the few states that did, like the governor said. And we actually cut taxes in the state of Oklahoma. I cut corporate taxes from 6 to 4% because we want every corporate headquarters to know that if they're already in Oklahoma, we want them staying in Oklahoma, and we want to attract more, and we cut individual tax rates. And I also instituted the earned income tax credit and put that back for the working poor. So we're really trying to move the needle. As Biden is trying to raise taxes, in Oklahoma, we're cutting taxes.
So we have these, you guys are good. Every line's an applause line. That's a good indicator. We have
a good audience.
It's a good audience. It's the best audience, okay? We have this whole divide between red and blue, and we see people voting with their feet. And by the way, they can't do anything with those kind of votes. They're really getting counted because they're going from blue failed cities to red states. You see the economic engine going into your states. Specifically, your 2 states are really benefiting from this.
Yeah, well, I've got to tell the audience here and everybody watching on TV, my Oklahoma Economic Developer of the Year award, I could have chosen a lot of people in Oklahoma, but I decided to give it to Governor Gavin Newsom of California. So he's done more for our state than anybody.
That's good. So you have this whole idea that the red states are growing, people are leaving blue states to red states. Socialism couldn't be working because everybody's fleeing these states. And then you got the question of the swamp. You got the question of D.C. You know, there's this radical idea that we ought to get these agencies out of the Beltway and send them out across the country. If you had one cabinet agency you could have in the state of Tennessee, what would it be?
Oh, gosh. I'd like 3 of them, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't be like that other former governor. Don't forget what they are.
No, there's so many.
I'm not Texas. I shouldn't say that.
I think if I could have one, it'd be the Department of Education, because, man, we need to radically change the way we educate our children in this country. There would be no Common Core in the country, and there would be no critical race theory in America if the Department of Education were in Tennessee.
You know, critical race theory makes me almost pine for the old days when we were fighting Common Core. That seems a lot easier than the craziness they're doing now. What agency would you take, Governor Stitt?
You know, I love Department of Ags. We'd take that. We'd take EPA. We would totally change EPA. We like the oil and gas and the energy and environment. So we could take any of them.
It would be a concept, though, wouldn't it, to take the federal government and actually spread it out to the people?
Yeah.
It would be a transformation for this nation. It's not a crazy idea. It's actually it's a really interesting concept.
If Washington, D.C. wants to become a state, then they can't have the capital. We'll take the capital in Oklahoma City.
Like it. What do you think? Yeah, I like this concept of, you know, we believe in choice as conservatives, you know, choose.
Right.
You want the capital?
Choose where you want it.
Yeah, if you want to be a state, go be a state. Then you ain't going to be the capital anymore. And then I think we'd have a great competition for where that capital would be. But we know economically where that capital would be. It's in these red states. And that's why we're here. And we appreciate the fact that you guys are, both of you gentlemen, are looking at this issue of criminal justice reform, and you're taking the right steps. And what you're doing is you're providing leadership. That's what's lacking in this country. And to close out this segment, you know, our current president loves to talk about he wants to unify us. And, you know, it's hard to read a man's heart, so maybe he wants to unify us. What's your interaction with the President of the United States? Does he call you?
So let me say this about the former president of the United States, because you talked about how we got this issue of criminal justice reform and how we've talked about it being conservative. I just want to thank President Trump, because it was an agenda item for him, and it made governors like myself able to talk about and to cut through the conversation about criminal justice reform, because President Trump understood that there is a way to do criminal justice reform conservatively, and it paved the way for governors like us to do the work that we did. So I thank him for that.
Yeah. Well, it's been we both came into office in 19, and President Trump was so inclusive with all governors, Republican, Democrat. He had conference calls every single week with himself, with Vice President Pence. All of his cabinet secretaries were accessible. It hasn't been that way with this new administration. I've talked to President Biden twice, and we were talking about, you know, an all-of-the-above approach of energy in the state of Oklahoma. We've got 40% wind. Most people don't know that about Oklahoma. We love our oil and gas industry, but when we had this deep freeze all over the South, if you remember that, I told the president at that time, if we didn't have an all-of-the-above approach, because gas was frozen, wind was frozen, and coal saved the day, I said we would have had 2 weeks of blackouts had we not been an all-of-the-above approach in Oklahoma. And immediately he spins to battery. You know, we got to talk about batteries. So we have to have a base load. I know I'm getting off topic there, but it is so important that we have energy independence and we don't sell our future to radical countries that don't like us.
What do you all think about these two great Republican governors from Red America? Thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Really good.
Thank you.
Thanks, buddy.
That was fun.
Good.
All right, we're going to go that way.
This way?